Okay, hello everyone, can you hear me? Great. So, I am very pleased to see so many of you here. Thank you for joining us this evening for this special Desert Island Pesach program. Many of you, I'm sure, will be familiar with the BBC Radio 4 program, Desert Island Discs, and I won't go through the details of that, but obviously, you know, every week a national treasure is cast away to a fictional desert island, taking with them, or asked to take with them, 7 of their favorite discs, a luxury, a book, and it's a program of which I'm personally very fond. And as we were thinking about programming for Pesach and in these obviously very strange and difficult times, when everyone is marooned on their own desert islands to some extent, where some of us are with our families, with our partners, some of us are on our own, although hopefully sort of feeling the warmth and love of their family and community. So we decided that we wanted to try and recreate something similar on Zoom, and I hope that that's what we'll manage to do this evening. So rather than one national treasure, we've chosen 3 community treasures. And I'm really pleased that we have with us Eveleen Habib, Guido Rauch, and Rebbetzin Hadassah Fromson. I'm sure that many of you will know 1 or 2 or all 3 of them very well, and I don't intend to make an in-depth introduction, but just a few words of introduction. Eveleen is a very familiar person to many of us, and over very many years has contributed hugely to the life of our community, in particular, most recently, I think, organising lots of events under the Golders Green Events banner, but also particularly always being extremely cheerful and friendly to everyone in the community, to newcomers, to people who are there in every week, week in, week out. She really is someone of whom I think everyone is very, very fond. Guido, as many of you will know, if you don't know him personally, you'll, I'm sure, have heard Guido's beautiful davening on many occasions at Golders Green Synagogue, but particularly his Yom Kippur Mincha is the stuff of legends, and you know, we're all missing Guido's davening a lot at the moment. And we were sitting on first day Pesach in our garden doing Hallel with our children, and I said, we live a few streets away, I said to the children, if you listen really carefully, you might just be able to hear Guido's davening from a few streets away. But obviously, you weren't doing it loud enough, Guido, so they didn't hear. And finally, obviously, Hadassah, who is known, I think, to everyone. Rebbetzin, Hadassah, and Rabbi Sam joined our community in 2015 with then 2 children and now 3. No, then 1 child, sorry, they only had Ariel at that time. And now,
yeah,
and have, again, made a huge impact on our community in a really quite a short space of time. So we're particularly pleased to have all 3 with us this evening, but not only do they bring a great deal to our community, but when you think about their backgrounds, they also bring a real geographic diversity. Eveleen, as many will know, was married to Aldo, who was from Libya and spent a portion of her life in Libya. And I'm looking forward to hearing about the Pesach she spent in Libya shortly. Guido is originally from Switzerland and has stories, I'm sure, of Pesach spent in many different places. And Rebbetzin Hadassah was born and raised in Gibraltar before coming to London. So we've got a real geographic diversity as well as a kind of diversity from different parts of the community. And I think that all 3 are going to have lots of interesting stories and music to share. So we're going to start. Please bear with us. I've tried my very best with YouTube. I have 7 tracks lined up that have been chosen by our 3 castaways. I should add actually at this point that they're not being cast away together. Obviously, we wouldn't want to breach social distancing rules. They're being cast away to 3 separate desert islands. And they've each chosen a couple of tracks that they're going to talk to us about this evening. So before we get started, I'd like to ask each in turn, actually, and we're going to start with Eveleen, just to introduce yourselves a little bit and tell us a little bit about your background. I mean, I've given a very high-level history of each of the 3 of you, but just a little bit, just a couple of minutes from each of you, if we can, about where you grew up, where you've lived, where you've spent Pesach prior, obviously, to coming to Golders Green. So Eveleen, we'll start with you.
Thank you for the lovely introduction, Joel, and Kol HaKavod for getting this together. I was actually born in Bournemouth because my late father's office was evacuated during the war. I was born in 1943 at the end of the war. We returned to Edgware, where my father and mother were very well established. They were very deeply involved in building the Edgware United Synagogue and the whole community. I lived a nice, normal, traditional life in Edgware. My mother very sadly died when I was only 10 and she was very young, but we continued our life embraced by the community, and just as we are currently in this crisis. I went to North London Collegiate. I left school with A-levels but didn't want to go to university because I wanted to be independent. I didn't desperately like my father's second wife. And I subsequently walked into a wonderful job, had a wonderful social life, and then met Aldo on a blind date. And within a year, I had married, we went to live in Libya, and then life was very good. He died 7 years ago. His yahrzeit is actually this week. And I feel very blessed with my very lovely family, my children and my grandchildren, and so many good things in my life.
Oh, and it's great to have some of your grandchildren waving on Zoom tonight. I can see your fan club. Thanks, Eveleen. On to Guido.
Yeah, I also wanted to thank Joel for a fantastic job. I was born in Zurich in 1957, not as exciting as Libya or anything else. And I know the reason Joel really wanted me on the program, because he thought I was going to do some yodeling. So if anybody was waiting for the yodeling, It's not going to happen tonight. So that's just a small introduction. I was born in Zurich. I grew up in Zurich, and my mother died when I was 9. My father passed away when I was 13. I was brought up by an unbelievable woman, my aunt, who gave up her own life and moved to Zurich to be with us. Me and my brother, who were the orphans. My sisters were already married. And then since, having no parents and having a lovely aunt, I was a little bit of an unruly teenager, to say the very least. And in Switzerland, that doesn't really go down very well. So by the time I was 18, I was thrown out of school. And my family was obviously up in arms about this boy who doesn't do anything right. So they sent me to London. And I came to London. I did my A-levels in London. And then I went for 2 years to Yavne, to Yeshiva in Israel. And then I came back and went to university in London. And I settled down in Golders Green. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Thank you. And Hadassah, finally.
Hello, everyone. It's great to see you. All 55 of us. It is, so I was actually born in Israel and then moved to Gibraltar when I was about 3 years old and lived there till the age of 17. And Gibraltar is a very small, when I was growing up there was about 600 Jews. And by the time I was 10 years old, there was only one other Jewish girl my age. But we were all a family. We lived two stories on top of my grandparents. I saw them twice a day. So you walk in the street and you'd see everyone you knew. I was constantly late to school, even though it was only a 7-minute walk away, because it would take me 20-25 minutes by the time you speak to this one, you speak to that one. It's a very nice, very relaxed lifestyle. I remember after moving to London and going back just for holiday, someone stopped me in the street and said, Hadassah, why are you walking so fast? And for me, that really captured, the differences between like a London life and Gibraltar life. I moved here when I was 17. My family moved here and we settled in Edgware. And I went to Hasmonean Girls High School and I did my A-levels there. Then following that, I went to Israel for a year. I went to Michlala Seminary in Israel. And coming back, I went to UCL and started studying psychology. And I married Rabbi Sam, sitting behind me, who was just Sam back then, in our 3rd year of university. And we lived in Cambridge for 6 months together, which was very idyllic. And then we lived in Israel for a year, and then we came back and started life up in Hendon. And little did we know that not long after we would be moving to Golders Green, when we got this amazing job, which has given us so much meaning. And we really enjoyed being part of the community these last 5 years, coming up to 5 years. I cannot believe it. And we've grown our family here, and we've lived in a few different homes whilst we've been here. And so I would say I've had a bit of, I really enjoyed thinking about and preparing for this program, because it's really helped me think about the different places I've lived in, the different cultures. My mum is American and Ashkenazi. I grew up in Gibraltar, 7 generations Gibraltarian. And so it's always been interesting having a mix of Ashkenazi and Sephardi. And then I married Sam, who's Ashkenazi again, and still dealing with all those little tensions and, differences, and also wonderful extra things that we do at the Seder, which, we'll be talking about this evening. So that's just a brief background.
Great, thank you. As they say on Radio 4, let's have some music. So our first track was actually chosen by Eveleen and Guido. They chose exactly the same track, fortuitously. So I'm going to ask Eveleen to introduce it, and then I'll play a bit of it, and then Guido will add a little bit afterwards. Eveleen? Oh, sorry, I've muted you by mistake. Eveleen, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry about that.
The first, one of my choices was Vahisha Amda. We always sang Vahisha Amda during the Pesach service. We always managed to get the first few words correct, and we made a great mistake. We never could quite get it right. And then my lovely grandchildren, who I promised would get a mention, Harry and Izzy, came home from their school after some Pesach service there, and they started singing Vahisha Amda They were always singing it, this wonderful, wonderful version, not quite as good as the one that we're going to hear in a moment. The words are of such importance to me, and as anybody that sits in my rowing shore knows, I do love singing, and I don't sing quite as well as this, but this version just gives me great joy.
והיא שעמדה לאבותינו ולנו, שלא אחד בלבד עמד עלינו לכלותנו, עמד עלינו לכלותנו. והיא שעמדה לאבותינו, והיא שעמדה לאבותינו ולנו, שלא אחד בלבד עמד עלינו לכלותנו, עמד עלינו לכלותנו. והקדוש ברוך הוא מצילנו, מצילנו מידם. והקדוש ברוך הוא מצילנו, מצילנו מידם.
Yeah, I chose this particular version. It was composed by Jonathan Razel, who some people might know. He's an amazing Israeli-American composer who lives in Israel, became very religious. And he's just a really interesting guy all around. And the reason I love the song, first of all, the tune is, I think, absolutely beautiful. But it's also, the words, as Eveleen said, are very special. But there is a little Dvar Torah which I tell my children all the time, and it comes from the Sfas Emes. The Sfas Emes was the second Rebbe of the dynasty of Ger, and Ger was very connection to my family as well. And the Sfas Emes says as follows, the traditional verse, the way it's read is Shelo echad bilvad amad aleinu lechalotenu, and then not only one person in every generation, ela shebechol davar dor, and every generation many were trying to persecute us. And the Sfas Emes said something which I think is so appropriate for today. And he said, you should read it differently. You should read Shelo echad bilvad. In the times when the Jewish people were not united, Amad aleinu lechalotenu, then people started to persecute us. And he says, only then, when we were not united and people started to persecute us, then we needed HaKadosh Baruch Hu matzileinu miyadam. Then we needed God's intervention to save us all. But the first step should always be that there should be unity. That was his big message.
Thank you, Guido. So let's talk a little bit about Pesach. Hadassah, perhaps I can ask you first. What are some of your most vivid memories of Pesach? Where do you remember particularly spending Pesach before you came to join us in Golders Green?
So I would say my most vivid and special memories were when I was growing up in Gibraltar, where we would go to my grandparents' house just downstairs and would have Seder with them. And just remembering, the specific crockery and cutlery that they had. And we'd always have, we had my cousins who actually were deaf and mute, which always made a very interesting Seder guest. I remember learning how to do the alphabet and sign over one of those Seders. We'd always have them, and my cousins from England would come every other year. And it was really, it was a time in Gibraltar, a bit, you see it a bit here in England, the Ben Hazmanim time, when people come from Israel and come to their families and it kind of gets more filled up. But imagine that you just know everyone. Imagine you know every single face. So that's what it was like. It was such a great reunion of everyone coming back from wherever they lived and wherever they settled and their holidays. And it was just filled with so many more Jews and everyone you knew. And the weather was basically like we've had the last few days, you'd always get that around Pesach time. So it was the time to really, once I was a teenager, I remember my Afikoman present was getting sandals for the year. that at that time of year, because just the weather came up. And I remember the first time I came to England, I lived here, I just had to go back for Pesach in Gibraltar. There's just something about, you know, the air and the people there, and I went back for Chol HaMoed, and yeah, I just have these memories growing up, and over the years, the same Seder place with my grandparents, and my grandmother reading in Portuguese, my grandfather reading in Spanish, my mum doing her Ashkenazi traditions, my father doing his, and just having a whole big mix. And those, I think, are just my favorite memories that I've always looked back on and really enjoy and try to bring for my children.
And tell us about our next track, which is En Keloheinu.
So I tried very much to choose tracks which I thought, you know, really took me back to those times in Gibraltar and that I love. So this, you all know En Keloheinu. We sing it in shul every week on Shabbat after the Torah. So in Gibraltar, there's a custom between Pesach and Shavuot, and it starts on Pesach, to sing a particular tune, a very special tune. And in the main synagogues, it's sung at Mincha. So in Gibraltar, they have a custom, many Sephardim have a custom to do one parak of Pirkei Avot, of Ethics of the Father, each week between the weeks of Pesach and Shavuot. And so in the shuls, they would sing it, they would say Pirkei Avot, and then they would sing the song. But we also had our children's service, a service that was run entirely by children called the Talmud Torah service, which was in our school. And in those weeks, they would sing, we didn't have the Mincha prayer, we do it in Shachar. It would sing this tune. And it has, you'll hear, it's got the verse in Hebrew, followed by a verse in Spanish Ladino. And this was the closest tune. It's not exactly the right tune. I couldn't find the right tune on the internet. This is the closest thing. It's got a bit more of a Moroccan sound to it. I think what I've started to notice is that Gibraltar, which is very appropriate for it, they've got their own tunes, right? It's all a bit different from the other Sephardi tunes, and they can never find exactly the right one. But this one was close enough. It's got bits of it. Again, it sounds a lot more Moroccan than the Gibraltarian one, but it definitely sounds like that one. And I just loved it because I loved that it was, I loved the tune, and I loved the expression of just singing it in another language and making it just feel more at home for you. So yes, so this one is an En Keloheinu.
So Guido, let's come back to you now and tell us where you were.
I just want to ask Sue first. Sue, are we going to do this one?
Guido, tell us where you were going to spend Pesach this year and about some of your memories of Pesach in years gone by.
I was going to spend Pesach this year together with my new wife and my children in Israel, my grandchildren in Israel. That's what we were going to do. But as you know, things turn out a bit differently. So since as I told you before, my parents passed away quite early. So my memories of Pesach at home are a little bit blurred. But because we traveled a lot afterwards, I have a really beautiful memory when I was with my kids in Venice. first of all, to be in Venice and to daven in these old shuls is something spectacular. But then they had the Seder, and the Seder was one of those few occasions throughout the year when the whole community came together. It's a small, very small community, similar to Gibraltar in terms of numbers. They all came together, and we had an absolutely amazing Seder together. You know, songs were sung, groups were made, everybody was really fantastic. But the beauty of the Venice Seder or the Venice Pesach was after Pesach. At the night after Pesach, the whole community came back together and we had a spaghettata. We all had fresh spaghetti. So, I mean, that's one of my precious memories of having a fantastic Pesach. And I think that's one thing one should introduce. It would be a really popular custom, I can assure you that one.
We like to call it a yeast feast.
Whatever you want to call it. It worked beautifully.
Eveleen, can you tell us a bit about your memories of Pesach and then introduce our next song, which I know is particularly meaningful to you and your...
My memories of Pesach, it's very interesting because I've never shared this before with Guido. My memories of my childhood Pesachs are very vague. I do remember we were a very traditional home and we'd celebrate Pesach, but I don't have tremendous memories. I do remember one thing that might make a smile come on your faces. My sister, my lovely late sister Anne, and I used to sit at the table giggling during our Manish Tana, trying to impress the very handsome boy that was always at our Seder, Michael. And we used to hope that we were the one that my dad would say, you can go and open the door for Elijah, because Michael always went. But we were about 10 and 12, so it's not that important. My most vivid memories are definitely after I married Aldo. I have to say that. This young woman, which I was from Edgware, suddenly was catapulted into a totally different lifestyle. I lived in Libya for 2.5 years on and off. And it was so different. It was so wonderful because I really felt it was reminiscent of how I imagined the Exodus from Egypt. Let me just say a few things. I know I've talked to the shul about my experiences. The matzah. The matzah was baked in an oven in the garden by the much loved Arab helper that they had. And it was like a paratha, an Indian paratha or a pita bread. It was utterly, utterly delicious. Nothing like our square recusums or Manischewitz matzahs. When my mother-in-law was preparing for Pesach, the whole house was painted white. She brought her Pesach kalim down from the rooftop, the cupboard in the roof of the home. Everything was new and fresh. It was just wonderful. The Seder plate was not a Seder plate. The Seder plate was an enormous straw basket where the Pesach was an enormous, a very big piece of lamb. The charoses, which I still make to this day for my whole family, was little balls of pounded dates and nuts, wine and cinnamon. That's the things I remember most about the food. The traditions at the Seder table, just very quickly, for example, the plagues. When I sat at the table and I watched how they did the plagues, I thought, my goodness, my mother-in-law made carafes of homemade grape juice for Pesach. And each time they said a plague, they would pour the wine into a basin and then pour this delicious grape juice over it, as it were, to wash away the plague. And they said in Arabic after every single plague, Shema Selena, Shema Selena, God forbid that it happens again. And one other thing, I mean, I could talk a lot, but one other thing that really threw me a bit, on the last day, I think the 8th day of Pesach, Aldo came home from shul with a bunch of lettuce and spring onions, and he proceeded to not beat me, but tap me on the shoulder with this. He said it was a kind of traditional spring or fertility rite, a tradition they had. Well, I was pregnant with twins, and I think it really wasn't very necessary, but it was quite amusing. I won't say any more.
And the next track, Eveleen, is Alla Fiera
Oh,
del
this is very special. This is a song that is a version of Hadassah. It's called La Fiera dell'Est. It's an Italian version of Hadassah, which was very special to Aldo. And I'm also saying a shout out for Benny, because Benny, Chain and Aldo talked about and sang this song together in one communal Seder that Benny and a group of fellow congregants organised so wonderfully. Sheets were printed out and we all sang it. It's, my father went to the market, the Eastern market. It's, and he bought a little mouse, not a little goat, for 2 coins. And of course, the mouse was eaten by the cat and the cat was bitten by the dog, and the same story, very similar and very reminiscent of Chad Gadya. And there is still the Malach HaMavet comes, and there's still HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it's all within our tradition. It actually, I will not cry, but it makes me cry. It's beautiful.
Alla fiera dell'est per 2 soldi un topolino mio padre comprò, e venne il gatto che si mangiò il topo che al mercato mio padre comprò, e venne il gatto che si mangiò il topo che al mercato mio padre comprò. Alla fiera dell'est per 2 soldi un topolino mio padre comprò, e venne il cane che morse il gatto che si mangiò il topo che al mercato mio padre comprò. Alla fiera dell'est per 2 soldi un topolino mio padre comprò, e venne il bastone che picchiò il cane che morse il gatto che si mangiò il topo che al mercato mio padre comprò. Alla fiera dell'est per 2 soldi un topolino mio padre comprò, e venne il fuoco che bruciò il bastone che picchiò il cane che morse il gatto che si mangiò il topo che al mercato mio padre comprò. Alla fiera dell'est per 2 soldi un topolino mio padre comprò.
So let's move on now to talk a little bit about the unprecedented and strange circumstances in which we find ourselves this Pesach. As I mentioned at the start, we're all essentially marooned on our own mini desert islands. And obviously our thoughts and prayers are with those who are unwell and with those who have very sadly suffered the loss of loved ones. Hadassah, perhaps I could ask you first, when we come out of this crisis and when we come to celebrating Pesach next year, please God, in future years, how do you think that we may, maybe it's too early to say, but at this stage, how do you think we may look back on this time in years to come?
I think it is very hard to say, because I think people will be experiencing so many different things depending on their situation. For us, this is definitely one of the smallest Seders we've had, but we at the same time actually feel we were surprised. We had 4 Seders, by the way, everyone. We did 2 early kids Seders, followed by 2 halachic Seders, which started at 8:30 after the kids pretty much were in bed. But I think, we actually have had, I think one of the things, when you're a young adult and you have children, is the thing that you're always wanting is time with your family, being able to focus on the children, their different needs. And this actually has afforded us this opportunity to do that. I mean, in a forced way, we've had to just stop everything that's non-essential. We're not going to busy ourselves with or need to buy on Amazon or run out to the shops. And it's really made me focus on what is essential and what is important to focus time on, and different ways to teach your children things and different ways to reach out to people. I mean, I've had time for the first time in a long time to just call people and have an hour-long conversation. I haven't done that since I was a teenager, just speaking to someone on the phone for an hour. And granted, people are going through lots of difficulties at the moment, and unless you're connected to that imminently, it's hard to always remember that, because you're just trying to get on with managing your new schedule. But I think there's sort of, we have an opportunity ahead of us to sort of reevaluate the things that are important for us, the things that we can live without, the people that we need in our lives. For example, you know, we've never missed shul more, we've never missed our community more, seeing everyone, just, you know, the kiddush, just the daily minyanim, the structure to our day. Zoom, as fantastic as this is, just doesn't give you that interpersonal connection, which I think as humans we all really need. And I think when we come out of this, please God, we will all have much greater appreciation for other people, for the things in our lives that we do need to give more time to. And I hope that we'll look back on it and, you know, say that was a time of reevaluation.
Eveleen, I realised that I forgot to ask you where you were due to spend Pesach this year, but I'm going to ask you that and then ask you to talk a bit about your thoughts on this.
I was due to go to Israel with most of my family, especially because my second oldest grandson is on a gap 5 months, which I think is going to stretch a little bit longer. But we were planning to be in Israel. And you want to ask me about what Hadassah has just spoken about. And really, I couldn't put it better myself. I wanted to kind of preempt my answer by saying, I think all of us have had to face challenges in our lives, big challenges and small challenges. I think this is probably the most surreal, unprecedented, whatever word you want to choose, time, and it is unbelievable. But I think we are so lucky to live in this age where we can, even if we're alone, I'm alone, I don't feel at all alone because I have this possibility to be in touch with so many people all the time. And it's of great sustenance to me, I must be honest. But I don't want to inject any cynicism, but I do hope that when we come out of this crisis, we remain as connected, we remain as caring, we remain as thoughtful about our fellow man, woman, about our planet, about the way we care for all kinds of aspects of our lives. And I'm just thinking of people that live through crises like, I'm saying, wars and bereavements and all kinds of difficulties. I would like to feel we emerge in every way better people.
Lovely. Guido, I should say at this point, there have been a couple of pleas for you to do the yodeling despite your station entry. But I'll ask you just to talk a bit about the same topic about coronavirus, but also to introduce the next track, which is Muasapri.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the Rebbetzin and Eveleen have expressed most of our thoughts very, very well indeed. I just think one thing, I personally, when I look back at this Pesach, I must admit, and my thoughts are with all those people who had suffered, who were by themselves. That includes my sister who had lost her husband, who was by herself, includes my daughter Nina, who was by herself as well for Seder. But I had an absolutely wonderful, wonderful Pesach. There was the first Chag, I was with Kate alone. We had beautiful Sedarim. We went for beautiful walks. It was the most relaxing, peaceful Pesach one could ever imagine. So from that point of view, if I look back, I must say, that was pretty unique. But from a general point of view, I think one has to remember, very often we talk about Pesach as this, time of freedom and Zman Cherutenu and Exodus of Egypt. But the actual word, the Pesach itself, comes from the fact that the Jews were asked on the 14th of Nisan to bring the Korban Pesach. They were asked to commit to go on a journey, which they had no idea what it's going to be like. It was an extraordinarily courageous thing for them to do. They brought a lamb, which was considered to be something holy for the Egyptians, and they decided to say, yes, we are going to go on this. This was a mindset. What came afterwards, the Exodus, that was just a consequence of it. Without that mindset, it would never have happened. And I think that's what we have to remember, that if we are able somehow, as the Rebbetzin said, as Eveleen said, to change our mindset, then this Pesach will be really something which was unique. Because as Eveleen said as well, when the Bnei Israel were on the Mount Sinai, it says, Vayichan sham Bnei Israel mul neged ahar. And it uses the word Vayichan, which is in the singular. Normally it says Vayachanu in the plural. And Rashi explains, Vayichan, the meaning of it is they were ish echad belev echad. They were completely united. They were one. And yet 4 weeks later, they were dancing around the golden calf. There were divisions in the people, tribes against tribes, people against tribes. So I just really hope that if we have learned anything from it, then the future will tell. Because now it's easy to talk, but the future will tell whether we really have gone on a new journey and changed our mindset. Now you want to introduce the next song. The next song is radically different from the beautiful one which Eveleen before, which I love. It's one of my favorite songs, the one Eveleen. I really love that so much. So my song is Echad Mi Yodea, but in Yiddish. Mua sapru, mua dabru, as you will hear. And it is because when I grew up in Zurich, my family was a member of the Haredi Shul of the Eastern Europeans. And there was a Jewish school, which Barbara Cohen has gone to, they actually go to, that was set up by the Yekisha Haredim. And so our shul, so we're not going to go there. When we're a typical one school, we're not going to go there. And my father, in addition, didn't want me to send me there because he thought they're a bunch of wilde chayes, you know, completely no discipline, so he wasn't going to have me going there. So we had this range system that all my Hasidic friends from childhood and me didn't go to the Jewish school. We went to the non-Jewish schools. But we had a fantastic, what we call Ched or Talmud Torah there. And my first Rebbe, at the age of 7, who taught me Mishnah and Talmud, was a Hasidic guy from Bnei Brak. And since he came from Bnei Brak, he didn't want to speak a word of German or anything like that. He only spoke Yiddish. So he introduced me to the beautiful language of Yiddish. My father grew up speaking Yiddish, but when he was 20, he decided never to speak a word of Yiddish again. And that's what he did. So I learned not only a love of Torah from this Rebbe, a love of learning, but I learned the language. And the language has been with me as a link to my past, because my parents and grandparents came from Eastern Europe. But also I've given it to my kids as well. It's a song which we all sing, and I've taught it to other members of the shul. And you have to go with it. That's the whole point.
Einer ist Gott und Gott ist einer und weiter keiner. Mua sapru, mua dabru, oischu, jam tadaria. Wer kann sagen, wer kann reden, was die zwei bateit, was die zwei bateit. Zwei sind die Liches und einer ist der Gott und Gott ist einer und weiter keiner. Hey, mua sapru, mua dabru, oischu, jam tadaria. Wer kann sagen, wer kann reden, was die drei bateit, was die drei bateit. Drei sind die Oves und zwei sind die Liches und einer ist der Gott und Gott ist einer.
Und Gott ist einer und weiter keiner.
Wer kann sagen, wer kann reden, was die vier bateit, was die vier bateit. Vier sind die Immes und drei sind die Oves und zwei sind die Liches und einer ist der Gott.
Und einer ist der Gott, in Gott ist einer.
Hey, mua da bru, oischu, jam tadaria. Wer kann sagen, wer kann reden, was die vier bateit, was die vier bateit. Viele sind die Chamushim,
Fünf sind die Chamushim,
und drei sind die Oves und zwei sind die Liches
in einer ist der Gott.
und weiter keiner.
In weiter keiner.
Mua da bru, oischu, jam tadaria. Wer kann sagen, wer kann reden, was die sechs bateit, was die sechs bateit. Sechs sind im Schneies,
Sechs sind im Schneies,
und vier sind die Immes und drei sind die Oves und
drei sind die Liches und zwei sind die Liches. In einer ist der Gott.
und weiter keiner. Hey, mua sapru, mua da bru, oischu, jam tadaria. Wer kann sagen, wer kann reden, was die Simbateit, was die Simbateit. Sieben sind die Wochentag,
Sieben sind die Wochentag, sechs sind im Schneies,
und vier sind die Immes und drei sind die Oves und
drei sind die Oves, zwei sind. In einer ist der Gott.
I took an executive decision there, Guido, to let that track run right through to the end. I think this is definitely one of the most eclectic YouTube playlists in all of Gold is Green tonight. So let's move on now and talk a little bit about some of our Pesach customs that we have carried on from our own past. Eveleen, you already talked about some wonderful customs that you experienced in Libya, but what is there a particular custom from your childhood or your background that is you've carried on and is particularly meaningful to you?
Yes, I double checked with Joel that I could talk about Bedikat Chametz as being a custom, because I realise it's part of the Seder ritual. But I remember in my home with my father, he took a feather from a butcher, my goodness, a feather from a chicken to go around, get the chametz and sort of wipe, put it into the little plate. Okay, that was simple and uncomplicated. I married Aldo and I was very pleased that he had these same traditions, and he made a little knife out of paper that he folded and he went around the house. And my 4 delightful children, they giggled a bit and sometimes they were a bit annoyed. And I'm just watching Harry and Izzy and I'm going to see the expression on their faces. And he would go around with a candle, and if anybody dared, like Bert, to make a noise or something, he'd say, And he got very annoyed if people didn't follow. And I know that my son-in-law still does the same thing. So we went round and we collected the chametz. One year, I think Jane's family had moved into me. It was the year that Aldo died. They stayed with me for a few months. And I said to Louis, grandson that's in Israel, listen, it's a big house. Would you like to run round and hide the chametz? And he said, yes. The only thing is, when we got to the second floor and the last room, I didn't realize it was a hide and seek. We could not find that chametz anywhere. So I said, look, it doesn't matter, because we make the prayer saying whatever is in my possession is like the dust of the earth. I think a year later, I found it hidden in a very obscure place. And not poignantly, but this year I am on my own. And I still went round my 3-roomed flat. The only thing is I did know where I'd hidden the chametz. And I made my prayer. And I took it downstairs and burnt it on the eve of Yom Tov. And I thought, there are so many things that are deeply entrenched in you, and that is one thing.
Thank you. Hadassah, tell us about a custom that's meaningful to you, and also our next track, which is another Had Gadya in a different culture. Oh, sorry, I need to unmute you.
Thanks, Joel. Yes, so I have lots and lots of memories and customs from Pesach that we do. Probably the best one that we always did, we didn't have like a traditional Seder plate with my parents. We had this really heavy ceramic bowl, blue and white, and you'd have all the things of the Seder on it. And one of the customs we have is to go around every single person of the Seder, and anyone who's been at a Seder with us will know this, and we go wave this bowl on top of people's head, this very heavy Seder plate, and we say, Bivhilu yatzanu mimitzrayim, and then we hit them on the head with it. Okay, and the purpose of this, as with everything with the Seder, is really to get the kids to ask questions, and the adults to ask questions, and you kind of do 2 bumps, and you do it as softly as you can. And we would just not fail to giggle. It was just such a fun part of the Seder. And the funniest would be when my dad would normally go around doing it to everyone. And then my mum got to do it to my dad, and kind of was like a tit for tat. And, depending on how frustrated she was, she might hit him a bit harder this year or next year. And it was always very funny. And I remember, I forgot, it's been a very busy lead up to Pesach this year. I completely forgot we were talking a lot about the Seder with the kids, but I forgot to tell them about that. And when I started to do it, they both were just in hysterics. They just couldn't believe what I was doing. That I was waving this plate around the head and bashing them on the head with it, lightly tapping. And they loved it. And it's just, that's, definitely one of the parts of the Seder that wherever I go, whatever Seder I'm in, Ashkenazi, Sephardi, we always make sure to do it. Other interesting traditions is, and this came from my grandmother's side of the family who came from Portugal, is they used to put matzah, like the Afrikoma matzah, I think, in a napkin. And when it came to Avadim Hayinu, they'd put it on their backs as they're like carrying their matzah out of Egypt, or, and they're going free. And so that was, and they'd go around the table, as well as the leeks and the spring onions. And like Eveleen mentioned, we'd also pour for the 10 plagues a whole cup of wine and a whole cup of water for each of the 10 plagues. And these are just, they're definitely traditions that I think with Seders, with our kids, the whole point is to make it vivid for the kids and fun and interactive. And these are the things that we remember, we try to bring forth, and the things that really carry us for all the Seders throughout the years. More, I think in some ways more than the words. is these extra little things we do. So we are very religious about these little bits of the Seder that we add in. So this next song is called Un Cabrito. So it's a Spanish version of Haggadah, whereas we had the Italian version before. So again, you know, this brings me very much back to thinking of my grandfather, my grandparents. I think this was actually almost their favorite holiday. My grandfather actually passed away on first day Pesach 1 year, the last year we lived in Gibraltar. And so I very much always think of him on first day Seder, first day Pesach, it's his Yortzeit, and he just really was in his element. And one of the things he loved at the end was singing Haggadah, Un Cabrito, Por dos Chivito. Now this particular version is, please bear with me, it's the only thing I could find that was close enough. So apparently in 2002, this Spanish flamenco singer who grew up in Granada called Estrella Morente, and she's been trying to sort of bridge all the cultures of Spain together, so the Islamic culture and the Christian culture and the Jewish culture. And Granada is, you know, really one of the homes of that. You've got the Alhambra there. There was a big Jewish community in Granada, and so she weirdly got the song of Haggadah in Spanish and made it this famous flamenco song, which is very bizarre. So you know, Joe's gonna play it in a sec, but it's basically Haggadah in Spanish, and it was definitely the closest thing that I could find on YouTube to what we used to sing.
Thanks, Hadassah. So finally, Guido, we have one more track from you, which I would like you to introduce, and also just briefly tell us about one or two customs that is particularly special to you.
Yeah, my tune couldn't be more different from the one we heard right now. We are back to the old Ashkenazi world this time. It's a track from, it's an interesting story actually, because it's from Hallel. It's one of my favorite tunes in Hallel, and when the whole shul is together, we all sing it together. It's just a beauty, and the words are just so spectacular. It's Mo Ashiv Lashem Kol Tagmola Aloi. How can I ever repay God for all the things He did to us? And I think when we live in times like that, it's interesting. The night before Pesach, I saw the program, The Return to Belsen. I don't know when some of you saw it. It was just unbelievable. It was gruesome from every point of view. And then you kind of realize, however hard things are, Ma Ashiv Lashem Kol Tagmola, can we not be grateful to everything God gave us to us? I mean, that is just something, a feeling which I have very strongly. And this is sung by another Ger Chossid. He's called Mordechai ben David. His father was a very famous Chazan in Ger, David Verdiger. And the song was written by Rav Aviezer Wolfson, who, interesting enough, when I was a little boy, when I was 10, after my mother had passed away, we went to St. Moritz, to the Kosher Hotel for Pesach. And Aviezer Wolfson, who was an extremely interesting character in general, was there. And I went skiing with Aviezer Wolfson. So many years later, he composed a song for Mordechai ben David, which we're going to hear right now. And as far as custom concerned, the one custom which we have continued is that for Urachat, it's always the youngest one who walks around with the bowl and the water to have everybody, you know, wash their hands. And I tried to convince Kate that, but she wasn't having any of it. There we go. But the other tradition which we have, and that's something which you can all know, is in our house, we all sang a lot. We sang an enormous amount. We didn't have any singing books. We just sang the whole Haggadah practically. Whenever it was something to sing, we sang. So let's hear Ma'ashiv L'Shem sung by Mordechai ben David.
Sure I speak for everyone, Guido, in saying none of us can wait for you to be back on the Almud leading the whole community in that song, that beautiful song. As Kirsty Young or latterly Lauren Laverne says after track 6 or 7, it's time for me to cast you away. And obviously, as I said at the start, we're not casting you away to the same desert island. You'll be at least 2 meters apart, but probably more. And we've agreed a few special rules for the things that you're able to take with. We will allow you to take a Haggadah and the complete works of Shakespeare and one other book for the 8 days. So I'd like to know, what would your book be? And we'd also allow you to take a luxury. We're going to provide matzah, and if your custom is to eat kitniot, then your luxury can include kitniot. So I'd like to ask, and finally, if the waves were to wash away your Haggadah but leave only one page, we need to know which song you'll be keeping. So I need to know your book, your luxury, and the one song you would keep with you. And we'll start with Eveleen.
Okay, my book. My friends, my good friends, of which loads of them are looking at me, including my friend Trudy from Ranana, might know that I'm not as voracious a reader as I used to be, so I tribulated quite a lot about this. I thought I might go back to my childhood and take one of the 600,000 books that was sold by a famous English children's author, but somehow I felt that the complete works of Enid Blyton might not go down well in our very erudite, cultured and book reading community. So I'm actually going to take Natan Sharansky's Fear No Evil. It's the story of the refuseniks in the 1970s. It's about Sharansky's trial, his incarceration in much more difficult understatement circumstances to ours, and his subsequent freedom, liberty, just as the story of Pesach is, from slavery to freedom. I have an enormous amount of admiration for that person. What was the other question? Oh, no, right, my luxury. Now, I wasn't going to debate this with Joel. One person's luxury is another person's necessity. A certain gentleman up north has introduced me to a smartphone. I could not survive without my smartphone. It links me on Zoom, it links me by email, it links me by WhatsApp. It's helped to make me cope with this difficult isolation. And please, therefore, may I take my my mobile phone with me. Obviously, all the extra costs and everything will be paid by me very happily. And as for the one page, as La Fiera dell'Est is not in the Haggadah, I think I would take Vahisha Amda.
Thank you. I believe in the actual rules of Radio 4, they wouldn't allow you to take a communication device, but as we make up our own rules, we decided to allow it. I'll happily grant it to you. Guido.
Okay, as far as the song is concerned, well, you probably guessed it. It's Mua Sapro, the page which I would like is the Mua Sapro. As far as the book is concerned, many years ago in Jerusalem, I discovered a bookshop called Yarden. It's on Rehov Yafo. And the owner is violently anti-religious. I mean, it's quite unbelievable. But we always chat and we always go in. And many, many years ago, he said to me, because I bought the Israeli books, the Israeli authors in English, and he said, stop reading all that Amos Oz and that David Grossman. I'm telling you what you should read is Meir Shalev. And he introduced me to Meir Shalev. And one of my favorite books is A Pigeon and a Boy. And it's one of the most beautiful love stories. It is a love story. And it's also about the establishment of the state, which I still think is one of the greatest miracles we have. So that is the book I would like to take along. And when it comes to the luxury, you know, I'm sitting in my office, as you can see, I get when I'm admired if everybody comments on my terrible filing system. I mean, I'm not sure why that should be, but never mind. But I'm also, what you can't see, I'm surrounded by pictures of all my loved ones, of Kate, my kids, my grandchildren. And I'd like a little photo album, which I can along because they give me an enormous amount of strength and love and joy. There we go.
With absolute pleasure, Guido. It's yours. And finally, Hadassah.
So the book I would take, so I had my like sort of what I would actually take, which be, I think this very much reflects the fact that our quarantine time, there's no time for reading. It's just very busy with kids, and at the end of the day, we're just so exhausted. So part of me was like, oh, I'll be able to catch up on my learning, which I'm meant to be doing for my program, and I'll take my Masachet Nida. But then I thought that wouldn't be such an interesting answer. And so I thought, oh, maybe I'll take a book which I've always tried to read, but never managed to. So when I was really young, I made the very big mistake of buying the trilogy of Lord of the Rings, but all in one. So it's like this fat with very small print. And it's just been so off-putting. And I just feel like it's one of these classics I've never read, because it's been so off-putting, and I feel like if I'm stuck on a desert island for 8 days, I would be forced to read it, and then I would have just like ticked that off my list. So I would do that. And then in terms of my luxury, I must say it would just have to be chocolate spread, because if you're giving me matzah for that, like, you know, I feel like the only way to really be able to manage matzah for 8 days without anything else would be with chocolate spread. But of course, if I really was going to be stuck on a desert island, the first thing I would reach for would be like my Siddur Tehillim, which, you know, I actually grew up in Gibraltar very strong in saying Tehillim. We say Tehillim all the time, and I find a lot of comfort in that. And in terms of the page in the Haggadah, that actually brings me to my last song, it would be Dayenu. And that would be almost, it would be very much echoing what Guido says, that I find this one of the most inspiring songs and parts of the Haggadah, in that it really reminds you to focus on every single element, on every individual element that you are grateful for, and realize that, you know, even if it wouldn't have ended out even well, right, you can still be grateful for those moments. I remember, for example, the way this really manifests for me is that, you know, when you know, with friends, when they've lost a baby and then they've gotten pregnant again, sometimes there's this fear, like, you know, what if this is not a good pregnancy and things like that. And then remember, the most powerful point is, you know, just focus on this moment, be grateful for this moment. And I feel like, you know, at times like this, when there's so much uncertainty about what will be and, you know, will everything be okay, I think the most powerful thing you can do is focus on this moment and be grateful for this one very moment without worrying about the future, whether we'll be okay or not, right? Even if God took us out of Egypt and left us in the desert to starve, I mean, what sort of gratitude, you know, how can you be grateful for that end? But you can be grateful for the moment of inspiration that you've received, the moment of appreciation. And I think that's the thing that will, you know, that carries us through in life, and can give us meaningful and satisfying life. So if I was stuck on a desert island, I'd definitely want to bring that with me, to remind me, to look around me, realize, you know, whatever happens on this desert island, I can appreciate, you know, the sand and the sea and the beauty around me, and just be in the moment. And that is a song I would take with me.
Well, what more can I say? But Eveleen, Guido, and Hadassah, thank you so much for letting us hear your Desert Island Pesach. And we're going to close out the program with Hadassah's final music choice, which is Dayenu.
Thank you, Joel. Amazing.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. It's been amazing to see everyone's faces. Thank you for turning on your videos. We miss you so much.
We really do.
Yeah.